Welcome to Arctic Aurora LifeScience monthly update for June 2021. So this is an exciting moment and it's been an exciting month for us. For us, the most important thing is that we have now launched our second fund, which is a UCITS fund focused solely on biotech. And we have been talking about it before in this updates, but now it's launched since the 9th of June. And we are very happy to be able to start that fund. We will talk more about the first week's performance of that fund and the news related to it. But to start with, we will run down the normal items that we usually have in this update. We will comment on the sector sentiment, and then we will comment on a very important event for the sector, the controversial approval from FDA of Biogen's Alzheimer drug Aduhelm. That gave implications for the whole sector during this month. We will also comment on the fund performance of the two funds and the top and bottom contributors for June. Daniel will then deep dive into CRISPR gene technologies, and we will comment on the exciting data we have got from Intellie this month. We also participated in a very successful biotech IPO, Verve, which we will comment on later in the update. And then towards the end of this presentation, we will briefly go through some other biotech news, both positive and negative, and also look a bit in the future. So I hope you will enjoy. Starting with market and subsector development, the month of June was a very positive month for Biopharma. And as you can see on this chart, you can see the green line actually exceeding the black towards the end of the graph. And the green line, as you might recall from the other presentations, is showing Nasdaq Biotechnology Index. The black is S&P 500, and the blue is Biopharma, is large pharma. And this graph shows the development from the start of 2020, i.e. you also see the effect of the COVID, of the pandemic outbreak and the development since then. And what is clear now is that, as we have talked about, biotech did have a correction in the beginning of 21, but we see strength coming back into the sector clearly. You can also see in this chart that during the month of June, we really saw a spike the first week, which is related to the expectations around the approval of the Biogen Alzheimer drug. And we started our fund actually the second week of June in the biotech fund. So we are not really launching with that first positive week in the fund, but still a positive development. So looking into June more in detail, this is a very short time period, of course, but just to show you that all the segments of the Biopharma has in this month outperformed S&P 500. And I have also added the purple line, which shows XBI, and XBI it's the same companies as in NBI, but the smaller companies get a larger weight. And what you can see is that actually the smaller companies did have a strong run towards the end of the month, but also had some negative news that pressed down a bit the XBI index, which Daniel will comment on later in the presentation. So, one of the most questioned and discussed approvals of I would say, Biopharma history took place this month. And that was the Alzheimer drug from Biogen that got approval on June 7. And it was a very turbulent time ahead of the approval, and very questioned approval. We ourselves were very cautious about it, and we believed that the data were very weak. But anyhow, the FDA against its own advisory board, actually approved the drug. And why is it so controversial? Yes, it was because it was more or less approved because of a biomarker that the drug can reduce one of the dangerous proteins causing what you believe causing the disease. But there were two trials that were supposed to show efficacy and support the approval of the drug, and only one trial showed a small success. So it's a very questioned approval. The stock, you can see here, in this chart, you see the different stock price developments, and the green curve is the Biogen share price. And in anticipation of the approval, the stock started to go up, but it went up strongly on the day of approval, up to $400. But now you can see the green curve has faded down again after some initial good, strong days in the beginning. And that is due to that the discussion around the approval has increased, the debate has increased, and especially there's a question on how should this drug be administered, because or given to what patients, because it's a very broad label enabling anyone to be prescribed this theoretically, but it's very expensive. It's $50,000 a year. So and in US you have 6 million Alzheimer patients, and if 1 million patients get this drug, of course, then you will have a huge cost of about $50 billion US, which is that's kind of so high numbers. So it's now a provocating situation, and the debate is going on. But it was cleared, and at the same week, also Eli Lilly got breakthrough designation for their drug with the same mechanism of action, and their drug is called donanemab. And then other also Alzheimer-related companies with Alzheimer compounds went very strongly during the month. And that includes the large pharma companies, Roche, and as well Lilly, as I said, Japanese Eisai, and then BioArctic. So all in all, this was directing, you can say, and impacting the sentiment for the whole sector during June. And it kick-started a good sentiment, but now I think it's in detail regarding Aduhelm. It's a discussion of how that should be prescribed going forward. For us, if you look at the performance of our funds, in Arctic Aurora LifeScience, the large pharma companies contributed very positively, and depending on currencies, we had a very good absolute return, and the Norwegian class was up 7.35%. As you can see, the Swedish 7%, and the dollar class 3.7%. Slightly though lagging MSCI World Pharma and Biotech benchmark 4.4. The Arctic Aurora Biotech Select Fund has, as I mentioned, only been alive the last 3 weeks, and it wasn't really part of the run up after the Biotech Biogen approval. But anyhow, for the first weeks, we can see the Norwegian fund class up almost 6%, the dollar class almost 2%, and NBI 2.16%. So if you split up on contributions, as I mentioned, this is as I mentioned, the large pharma companies did very good during June, and this is Arctic Aurora LifeScience performance contributions. And as you can see, the top contributor is Eli Lilly. That is, aside from being a very good company in general, they also got, as I mentioned, this breakthrough designation for their Alzheimer drug. And we have a good position in Eli Lilly. We were also benefited from the other large pharma companies, Roche and Merck. and then Thermo Fisher and Moderna. In the bottom contribution in AALS, you will see some biotech names, but as you can see also, the holdings we have in those stocks are very small. So the negative contribution this month in AALS has been the single contributors have been adding small negative contributions. But Exelixis we will comment on specifically in this presentation later. In terms of Arctic Aurora Biotech Select, we have been participating in a fantastic IPO, and the stock is up 219% currently, which we also will comment on more later on in the presentation. Otherwise, also commenting a bit about Biogen again. So in our fund AABS, Biogen is a neutral position for us. And as I mentioned, we opened the fund after the hype in the beginning of the approval. So and after that, Biogen has actually faded down from 400 to around 350. So therefore, Biogen is contributing on the negative side, despite this news during the month, because our fund launched after the positive news. And then we have some negative news from Exelixis and Genzyme that Daniel will comment on. So I leave it over to you, Daniel.
Thank you, Ulrika. So it was actually a pretty intense month in terms of milestones for a lot of companies in the biopharma sector. But I guess if we were to single out one besides Biogen and Alzheimer's approval, it will be the news from Intellie Therapeutics on the first in-human clinical data from gene editing with CRISPR. If we can switch to the next slide. So this is a quick recap of what CRISPR is, or the CRISPR-Cas9 protein complex. It basically does three things. One, it searches the DNA and finds a very specific piece of DNA that it attaches to. And this specificity is important because if it would bind to any site in DNA, it would be pretty much useless or even dangerous. Secondly, this construct cuts a piece at the DNA that it's found and removes a part of the DNA. And then thirdly, inserts something else in its place. And there we have it. It's a cut and paste approach to altering genes, and so this is supposed to be the strength of this platform. Will it work in humans? That was the question before the Intellie data. So Intellie tried this in a disease called transthyretin amyloidosis. It actually has some commonalities with Alzheimer's disease that we just mentioned, namely that it is caused by a protein going haywire. In this case, it's caused by a mutation in the genetic code for a specific protein that makes it accumulate in different tissues in the body. And this causes problems, for example, in the heart or in the nerves or kidneys. And there's a significant decrease in life expectancy when the manifestation starts of this disease. And it's actually a pretty well validated approach that if you can remove this misfolded protein, you can actually have a very good clinical outcome effect. So you have already sort of proof of concept in removing the protein. So the question is, could CRISPR allow you to remove a lot of protein from the body? And the answer is yes. If you look at the graph, which shows the blue, purple, and the blue-gray lines, it shows the CRISPR-Cas enzyme inserts for different dose levels. And you can see the small dose level got a significant reduction in the protein levels versus control, the gray line. And then in the very high, or in the two highest doses, you saw a very large decrease in protein levels. And this is, of course, very promising. This is better than current treatments with a one-shot only approach. So during 1 year, you saw maybe not a full reduction in protein, but very close, over 90% reduction in protein in the highest dose. So yes, this was positive news. will it be revolutionary to this disease in particular? Well, we already have pretty good treatments that were actually recently launched, but the key thing here is the platform that CRISPR actually works in humans. And another read-through from this is that the graph we're seeing here in humans was very similar to the data that Intellie presented on preclinical models, which led everyone believe that if you have positive preclinical data with CRISPR, then the chances are good that you will have good clinical data. So if we switch to the next slide, we saw what happened not only to the Intellie stock price, but also some other CRISPR companies that utilizes this technology. For example, Beam Therapeutics, Editas, and CRISPR Therapeutics. So pretty significant share price increases there during the month because of this. And again, this is because all these companies has shown that the mechanism, if you can show that it works preclinically, actually works in the clinic as well. So, and then of course we noticed a red line that pops up in the middle of the month, and Ulrika mentioned that was the IPO of Verve Therapeutics. So brand new CRISPR company, and what they do, if we switch to the next slide, is they target proteins as well and target reduction of protein. And again, a validated target called PCSK9. And if you reduce PCSK9, you have very good chances of reducing blood cholesterol levels. So Verve is specialized in cardiovascular diseases with the CRISPR gene editing approach. And the data we see here is in preclinical model, and it looks very similar to the clinical data that Intellie has shown. So again, when Verve entered clinical development, they are a preclinical company thus far. Then I think expectations are high now that they'll be able to show something similar to what Intellie did, and of course that is promising for the stock price. So we already saw about 100% jump from the IPO price in the days that followed the introduction to Nasdaq, and then when Intellie's data came out, it actually jumped a further 100%. So a tripling of the IPO price during June. And we participated in this IPO with the Biotech Select Fund, it being an earlier stage program than we usually invest in with Aurora LifeScience. So overall, positive news with regards to CRISPR. If we jump briefly to sort of the rest of the clinical development news, and there were plenty of them, we don't have time to go through everything here. One highlighted was Vertex Pharmaceuticals, and we actually talked about that during the fall, that their next attempt in revigorating their product portfolio with their in-house clinical development pipeline has not been doing very well. And they are targeting a disease called alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency. And if we look at the one-year stock performance from Vertex, it doesn't look very encouraging. And during, I believe it was in October, they had a big drop because of the first attempt in trying to ameliorate this disease. From the clinical study. This simply didn't show any good effect. And then they have a second attempt with a new compound, same disease, during June, that they reported that they will not move forward into later stage development because, again, the effect that they saw was too modest. So that further contributed to the drop of Vertex. There were good news, however, and that actually came from CRISPR and CRISPR Therapeutics, which are partnered with Vertex on gene editing in rare blood disorders. This is, by the way, in contrast to Intellie, this is called ex vivo gene editing, where you actually remove cells from the body and do the gene editing in the lab and then reintroduce the cells. And we're already seeing CRISPR Therapeutics do very well here in this diseases and also in oncology with cell therapies there. And the durability data that was presented at the European Hematology Conference in June showed a very positive durability effect on patients with sickle cell disease, one of these rare blood disorders. So that actually dampened the drop for Vertex a little bit, and that the sort of external part of their pipeline is actually looking pretty good with regards to the CRISPR collaboration. And finally, quickly, some other clinical news. Exelixis had a considerable drop with their cancer compound Cabometyx in combination with immune checkpoint inhibitors trying to induce a immune response to cancers. That phase 3 study in liver cancer did not significantly benefit survival in cancer patients, which contributed to a 90% drop during the month. Genzyme, a gene therapy, a more traditional gene therapy company, had their US phase 3 data in a rare eye disorder. Now, this is a bit of a complicated story because overall, this gene therapy has been proven to work. It's under review from the European Medicines Agency, but the US counterpart FDA won a US study where they compared untreated eye with treated eye for this gene therapy, and that difference was not statistically significant. However, we have learned before that this is a sort of in lack of a better term, leakage of the gene therapy from one eye to the other. They already show this in previous studies, which is actually a good thing if you think about it. But it kind of led to the phase 3 results in this particular study to be a bit muddy and not quite what the FDA had requested originally. So there are some uncertainties regarding the US regulatory strategy right now for Genzyme, and hence the drop in that stock price. Biogen was actually involved in another company called with Sage Therapeutics that are developing novel antidepressant therapies. And their drug, zuranolone, did actually meet the primary endpoint in a phase 3 major depressive disorder study. However, if you look at the quantitative aspect of that data, it looks like even though it's better, it may not be clinically meaningful, that effect size, which led to the drop in Sage Therapeutics price. So again, partnered with Biogen. However, Biogen had their big Alzheimer's news. So with regards to this particular news, I don't think it even moved the needle at all for Biogen. And then finally, a very good performer, and that's been Iovance, which we I think talked about last month. It's been a roller coaster for there in terms of the regulatory process and management issues. Currently, the company does not have a full CEO, a long-term CEO in place. But they did show data during conferences in June. 3 data sets to be precise. One was the duration data in melanoma patients with Iovance's cell therapy. That looks really good. So if you respond to this therapy, you are bound to respond during a long period of time, which is good. Impressively, they also shown combination data with immune checkpoint inhibitors, which sort of further elucidate or synergizes the immune response towards these tumors. So good data there as well. And they moved from melanoma to lung cancer as well. And the first initial data in tumor responses in lung cancer were quite good as well. So Iovance had jumped back from some of the turmoil that they showed in previous months with a 40% increase in stock performance during the month. So that was a brief selection of what happened news-wise this month. So if we move to, I think, the final slide, just looking ahead a little bit, and this is actually the first one, is a point that we had, I think, for during a lot of these monthly report videos now. When will the new FDA commissioner be named? It certainly hasn't been named thus far. We'll see. Maybe it's after sort of the pandemic have ebbed out, then you can afford to do leadership changes in the FDA, or the current acting commissioner will actually be appointed full time. Who knows? Some clinical and regulatory milestones ahead. One of our favorite companies, Albireo, will have their final FDA decision in July. That's what we were scheduled. They actually already received a positive opinion from the European counterpart in the previous month. So we're hopeful that it will be FDA approved as well. We have some interesting data sets to look forward to in ALX oncology. We already seen actually one data set after the turn of the month that looks interesting, to say the least. So we'll look out for more data from that company. On the other hand, Arrowhead also had some data released after the turn or the start of July that were less positive. We'll talk about that during the next monthly video, they'll also show data, presumably from their oncology program. So we'll see what happens with Arrowhead there. That was some of the sort of interesting biopharma milestones to look forward to during the summer. So I think with that, we'll wrap up this month's video. Thank you for listening. See you next month. Bye.